OK, let's now cross live to Melbourne. Actually, to Australia.
Yeah,
we saw, of course, the Opera House. I don't know if you saw those pictures, Trisha, of the Opera House being lit up with an image.
Well, because I'm Australian. I'm an Aussie, aren't I?
Of course, I forget that, I forget that about you, but of course you are.
I'm British passport, Australian passport, and, green card. But, talking about Australia as well, and I've been talking to many of my old colleagues and colleagues still with Channel 9 and various parts of the media there. Again, the outpouring of grief and what have you. Australians read more gossip magazines per capita than any other country in the OECD.
I think that's why I love Australia.
So
I love Australia. It's one of my favourite places in the world.
If you're on the receiving end of gossip, it can be a bit difficult. But on a serious note, they're very, very up to date, probably more discussing the royal things than we are. I have to say I was alarmed at one television presenter calling one member of the royal family a word that we wouldn't be allowed to say in any other part of the country. But Australians do have very salty language. What I want to do now is come to talk about the effect that the Queen dying has had in Australia, because, as I say, many Australians are just as shocked as people in the UK. Joining us now is Rachel Brunsden, who works in radio, I understand. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us here. I don't know what time it is there. It must be in the middle of the flipping night for you. So thank you so much for joining us.
It's all right. It's not the witching hour yet. It's 11:38, so I'm okay.
Oh, 11:38. That's hats off to you. So what would you say the reactions are? I mean, there's been a few alarming discussions amongst some of our colleagues on air. But what would you say the reaction of the everyday person is to the Queen? Is it similar to what we've seen in the United States, in the UK?
I think it's very similar. I mean, obviously we consider ourselves extended family and we feel it very deeply, even though we're quite far away. She was a constant to us, as she was to everybody else. And her passing, while we should have expected it to happen at some point because of her age, was still shocking. I think the thing that shocked me the most was that 48 hours prior, she was having her photograph taken with the new Prime Minister, and she looked pretty spry. She looked quite good, and then all of a sudden she's gone, and I was taken aback. I was genuinely shocked. But I've got to tell you a story. She came to visit 16 different times, and that's pretty good for how far away we are. She came 16 different times, and on one particular occasion she came to open our new Parliament House. And she noted with great interest and some intrigue that there was a funny pond in the courtyard of the interior. And she had said on a Zoom call earlier this year, when she met with Australians of the Year, it's a very prestigious award, and Australians of the Year are very grateful to receive it, and they often get a call from her or a meeting with her, and in this case it was Zoom. And she said she had always wondered how many people had fallen in it. And I thought that made her the greatest woman on the planet in my eyes. Curious enough to know how many people had fallen in this pond, which she was absolutely befuddled by. But that was the sort of woman that we knew her to be. That was the wonderful woman that we knew her to be. And she was revered, and she was loved, and she was beloved. And there's no other. I'm trying to find more words, but there really aren't any. She was glorious, and we loved her.
The interesting thing as well about Australia is and Trisha, I know you'll have something to say about this, is that there is that idea and the rumblings, and they've been going on for many years, about whether they remain a part of the Commonwealth, head of state, all of those sorts of things. But then whenever there's a visit by anyone, they seem to go away and everyone lines the streets, like Charles and Diana. When they visited, there were so many. When the Queen visited, and they seem that all of those ideas seem to just melt away as soon as they get some attention from a member of the royal family. Would that be a fair comment?
That would be absolutely fair. There's a lot of bandwagon jumping that goes on when people come to visit. And I think the rumblings of the Republic have been quashed for the last 15 years or so because we've had a Conservative government, so they haven't really had any kind of traction. We have a Labor government now and more of a Liberal government. There is a Minister for a Republic. I don't know what he does exactly at the moment, except maybe keeps beer at the appropriate temperature in his office. I don't know that he does much else. But I think that he also, I think it's an inevitability, but it was always a feeling of my own and my opinion only that it would never happen while she was living, and it would never happen within the next 5 to 10 years after her passing. It would just be completely on the nose and disrespectful. But I think it is an inevitability. On the plus side of a republic, you guys won't have to compete with us in the Commonwealth Games anymore. So there's that.
But here's the thing. Well, Anthony Albanese has been a Republican ever since I can remember, you know, when he was in Young Labour all the way back. So, yeah, I agree with that. One of the things I always remember, I don't know about you because I was living in Australia at the time, was when then Prime Minister Paul Keating came to the Queen to actually say that Australia was thinking about being a republic. Now, that all got subsumed, hidden, because the one thing he did, he put his hand in the small of the Queen's back, and all the Fleet Street photos were Paul Keating with his hand on the Queen's back. Hands off our Queen. He was absolutely hounded. And I remember I was fronting the 7:30 report at the time. Everything was about how dare what was they called him? The Lizard of Oz, Fleet Street called him.
Yes, the Lizard of Oz.
The Lizard of Oz. Touch our Queen. I don't know. That you know, and again, for all the republicanism, people didn't like it.
No, and it was there's things you just don't do. Now, in my mind, you don't do that for sure, but you also don't whisper in her ear, by the way, we're going to dump you. What was he thinking? This is why he was no longer Prime Minister. The man's clearly left the reservation at that point during her visit. I mean, I think he tried to bandwagon jump and sort of half missed the mark and ended up half off the wagon. And it was an absolute nightmare. And you remember very well, Trisha, it was a horror show and it never went away. To this day, you see that footage. It pops up all the time.
At the moment,
it just popped up now.
Yes, it's amazing. And I love the fact that, sorry, the Lizard of Oz, that is brilliant. Can we talk about, I mentioned the Opera House being lit with an image of the Queen. Those things get me a bit emotional, as I told Trisha earlier, when I see the international reaction, which is just so heartwarming, I think. What else is Australia doing? How has Australia been brought to a standstill? How much of the country will be at a standstill, and for how long?
We tend to be very respectful for I know this is a vague answer, but a very respectful amount of time. I know that in Paris they turn the lights off on the Eiffel Tower. We Aussies tend to do the opposite and sort of light it up. So that's why you saw the lovely image of her on the Opera House. In Melbourne, where I live, Flinders Street Station, which is one of the biggest landmark stations, the Spire on the Arts Centre, etc., are all lit in the royal purple, and all sorts of landmarks all around the country are also lit in that beautiful royal purple, which is obviously for her. I know there were a couple of, going back to that lovely guest you had before about football games. We had a couple last night which were handled in some journalists' minds, mostly Channel 9 journalists, but they said it was handled lovely and with lots of tact, and I happen to disagree in a very passionate way, where colourful language was used, as I saw the footage of it this morning. But I think in terms of what we're doing, I think we're paying respect exactly how she would expect us to do that. She knows we're a bit of an odd bunch. She knows we're loose cannons. She knows that we're the wacky cousins, we're the drunk uncles at the Christmas table. She knows that.
Again, that's why I love Australia again.
Rachel, Rachel, one of the things that, one of the reasons that I actually ended up being asked to go to supper with Charles and Camilla is because for Prince. We all keep correcting ourselves. King Charles loves Australians. I lived near Sandringham, and he was always inviting Australians around. My friend Kathy Lett, the Australian author, is also a really good friend of his and part of his circle. He loves Australians. And, of course, you're not far from Geelong and Geelong Grammar School, where, of course, the Prince spent much of his, part of his youth. And I think King Charles holds Australia very dear because he got to spend some time out of the spotlight there, didn't he?
He very much did. He spent a lot of time through Geelong Grammar at a place called Timbertop in Tasmania. And I think that is honestly where he developed his love of all things natural and nature and environmental. I really think that's where that stemmed from, that time he spent there. In Tasmania, if you haven't been, is a wondrous place. It really is. It's untouched, it's unspoiled, it's beautiful. So because of his affiliation with that school, he got to enjoy that program in that part of the country. And I think that always stayed with him and why he became such the eco warrior that he has become. And what I love about him and the cut of his jib that I enjoy the most is the fact that with his environmental crusades and his charities and so forth, he's not just a can rattler. He is very much, he knows his science. He's a very intelligent man. He knows his science. He knows exactly what soil is and what makes up soil. Now, soil to me is just soil, right? But this guy knows more about soil than anybody on the planet. And I just find that fascinating. And I think that all came back to this formative time he spent in Australia, and it obviously meant a lot to him, and it obviously formed who he was as a young boy. And again, it did get him out of the limelight, away from England, perhaps, for a short time, so that he could learn what it was to be a young man and to find out who he was outside of that particular institution.
Rachel Brunsden, radio presenter in Melbourne, really, really good to talk to you and find out what our crazy cousins in Australia, how they're reacting to that. I love that I love that way of describing Australians. Amazing. Okay.
I nearly found my Australian accent coming back.
Yeah, I'd love that. Good day, Trisha. Okay.